I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint presentation to start in with a little bit. I'm going to go through this quickly. Of course, since my computer crashed, I had everything open and ready to go at the time, which now I'll open up. However, we'll try to get through it regardless and get us back on track here. So at the end of this, and I'm going to try to watch the clock when I've got 10 minutes to go, I'm going to open up a data set and try to build out a data visualization on the fly with a interactive workbook so that you can see how this is done with the tool, and again, encourage you to go build some of this stuff out yourself, because there's data that you have that you probably haven't been able to get answers from right now. So I've kind of titled this Transportation Data Visualization for the Rest of Us. So I'm going to blow through some slides pretty quickly here. I already talked about who logistics is a little bit. Today's takeaway is that I can do that. I want you guys to know that you can do that. So again, we do a lot of supply chain network analytics, merger acquisition studies, advanced business analytics, site location. We work with site location specialists, that kind of stuff with our analysis. But most of it involves transportation of freight, whether that's rail, truck, whatever it is. So we don't deal with the highway network itself and the level that you do, but we deal with transportation. So we do these kinds of things. We use a variety of tools. Some on the left doing Monte Carlo simulations. We may just be plotting out, this happens to be a particular supply chain with all the various modes of transportation you get from plant to the DC or the customer, and we model all those things discretely in models in our supply chain optimization studies. That kind of a model would look more like this, which gets a little more complicated in terms of all the links and nodes that connect it together. And then we have to be able to display that back to the customer, so sometimes we use the software that I'm going to talk about, which is Tableau software. So if you've not used it, you can download a free copy. You can use Tableau Public, particularly if it's public data. There are a lot of bloggers, news organizations, and others that you can upload something like a gigabyte of data to their public site and do it that way. So kind of the traditional approach was you really needed your IT staff, your operations research folks to build out detailed content-specific applications for you to be able to load your data to it. And they were detailed, accurate, and customized, and often had long development cycles, needed substantial support staff, and in some cases quite a bit of development money to get done. They're all good. We have some of those things. I mean, this is kind of a density map of a data set that we were bidding on and threw on our network model to see how our rail track would be impacted by taking on this additional traffic. The next view of that actually shows how the product is going to be aggregated from some of the origin points up to Atlanta. Atlanta's over here up to Birmingham, and then it's going to run as a block up to our yard in Bellevue, Ohio, where then it gets spread out to Buffalo and Conway and the various other destinations. So similar kind of things that you deal with on a regular basis in terms of your feeder roads and highways and all that stuff, we just happen to have to do it where we own the track. And then that prints detailed reports which can indicate which trains are going to be out of capacity if you take this on. So if we need to add additional train starts to handle the traffic, we know how to do that. We also have yard simulations. So this is an overhead shot of a hump yard. It's not a training class in rail, so I'm not going to spend much time on that, but all those pieces are there, and they all have to work together to get the cars sorted out, because the cars don't move by themselves, so we have to have either a hump yard or the locomotives that move them. And of course, as you might guess, from time to time we need to be able to simulate that. So we have models built out where you can adjust the switches. Are they manual, are they automatic? You can add forwarding tracks and other things and try to optimize the throughput through that yard. So very similar kind of stuff. We got a room full of well, half a floor full of PhDs and advanced operations research type folks that build all that stuff so that you can then put in all of your parameters, all your operations operational considerations, and then do that what-if analysis before you ever started putting down track at, maybe $1 million, a couple $1 million a mile. So you don't want to just do that and then find out later on that that wasn't really what you wanted to do. So all those kinds of things look great. I saw a lot of really great presentations, really great looking information this week here, some just this morning. But maybe you've got your own set of data, you want to get at it, and how do you do that? So I'm going to suggest that if you've got data, you need to get Tableau. And just a little bit about Tableau, since I don't know how many of you are familiar with it or not. Founded in 2003, their founders came from Pixar, so they have a real focus on the visual side of it, using the proper color palettes, those kinds of things, and also from Stanford University that developed the VIS engine. So instead of having to know a lot of SQL or MDX, if you're hitting a data cube, it's a drag and drop interface. The software creates the SQL or the MDX behind the scenes, sends it off to the server or the underlying data source. You don't need to know any of that. I don't know any of that. But I can do a lot of things with it. So generally what's going to happen, you're going to have the desktop version of the software. That's where you create the visualizations, and or Tableau Public, so that might be another option for you. Then from that, you can either publish it to their hosted services, or you can purchase a server yourself and host it for whomever you want to provide access to it with. And it's all interactive. Once it's posted up to the server, and you can interact it with mobile devices, it recognizes those. There's even native Android and iPad versions of the software to interact with it from the server. So Tableau allows you to really get into the data quickly, interact with it, see what there may be there that you want to know. Again, they've got backgrounds with folks like Stephen Few and kind of the industry experts on data visualization. They've tried to build a lot of the best practices in the software so that you don't necessarily have to know them all yourself. It connects all manner of databases. You can see a long list here. They've got connections to, I think, 3 different versions of Hadoop, as well as Teradata DB2, all the major players from a database standpoint. So if you've got data and you need to connect to it, you can probably do it with Tableau. So a few supply chain examples. This was a quick little dashboard that was built out. That's not your eyes deceiving you. Some of the data is blurred out just because it's proprietary or sensitive information. But on the left-hand side there, you've got ethanol plants in the United States, and you can see them underneath here, the capacities, those kinds of things. They're color-coded by the fuel source. So it could be corn, it could be switchgrass, it could be brewery middlings or whatever they get rid of after they've made beer and it still has some sugars left in it. On the right-hand side, you've got a blender demand map. So this is looking at the amount of ethanol that the blenders need to mix with the gasoline at the destination end, because right now if you try to blend it in advance and pipeline it, it picks up water because of the alcohol in it. And then in the middle, so these are both running from either Excel or Access databases. In the middle is actually a view of real-time ethanol loads moving on the NS network by location, sized by volume, running against our Teradata operational data warehouse. So just ways that you can kind of build these views out from various data sources, even if you're not trying to, even if they don't have fields in common, you can build this stuff out. Just another view, simple bar chart, but in this case we were dealing with a customer with a lot of plants, looking at truckload carrier spend, and these bars are color-coded by the plant or the manufacturing facility. So C.H. Robinson up here gets a lot of volume from one particular plant, but there are some other plants that had no idea, because they all operate independently, that C.H. Robinson was such a big player for them as a corporation. And just the ability to be able to see that allowed them to have more negotiating leverage with that carrier when it came time for them to get rates for the pieces of traffic that Robinson handled for them. Bullet graph, it's another style of graph. And when you look at these things, think of your data this style of graph could make sense. So in this case, we're looking at the market rate, the average rate per mile for truckload transportation for that particular location, and the bar indicates their actual rate that they're paying. So in some cases, some mills are doing better than the market rate, some mills are doing worse than the market rate. But this could be any time if you've got actual versus planned data, 2012 versus 2013 data, anything where you want to have a comparison, that's a handy way to be able to do that. So that was all of the canned presentation that I was going to do. And I wanted to give you some kind of live examples so you see how this works and how the interactivity works for things that you might want to build out yourself. So in this case, this is a plot of course they have to open up now, they were all opened up before my crash. So this is a plot of locomotive movements based on GPS location information. And the image behind it, rather than using a map, a live map, we actually just took a snapshot of that particular drawing of that location and use that as a background image. So you can do this with buildings, you can do this with all kinds of structures where rather than having to have a live map feed, you can put another image behind that. And then I can just highlight individual locomotive paths through that rail network to see how they did. One of the other things that I could do from this, if I go back into the design mode, I can take this map here, I just did a right mouse click, I'm going to duplicate that sheet. So now I've got the same sheet duplicated. I'm going to take the ID number, drop it in on the pages shelf, and go back into the presentation mode. And now I can just play that, and it will walk through each of those IDs, highlighting the particular train that relates to. But you can do that with anything. You could put regions on the pages shelf. You could put the GPS data so you can actually see the movement of the path of the vehicle. You can do that with date time series information. So if you want to see how does my map change from month to month to month. And you do it as simply as I just did it, which is why I wanted to show it to you. So let me stop that. I'm going to move over to another example of data here. Census data. This is another example where we took the percentage of change by county and applied that. So again, if starting back in 1990 or 91 here, you want to be able to see how the population shifts are occurring by county across the United States. You can just play this and see which counties are gaining population, which ones are losing population, which may be significant as you're trying to match that up along with your highway infrastructures, your building plans, those kinds of things. Because not only does that impact all of the local traffic that you may be dealing with, but certainly it's going to impact the corridor traffic, whether that's coming in on truck long haul or say on an intermodal train, however that other kind of traffic gets there. So just another example of how the tool can be used. Okay, 10 minutes. And we have a representative in the room here that works with creating and publishing the freight analysis framework data. And this is a little workbook that was built out. Again, all of this is kind of scrunched because of the difference in screen resolution that just caused my PC to crash. And it's a fairly large database. It took just a little bit to open up. But basically, we've built this out so that you can do freight analysis from the freight analysis framework. You can select which major groups of commodities you want to look at, whether you want to look at domestic or export, which modes of transportation. I've selected pipeline, truck, and rail in this case. At the commodity level, you can get down to that 2-digit commodity level with the data. origin state, I picked Tennessee, which has 3 areas within the state of Tennessee that have been aggregated into the FAF data. So that's just a little background about the data. In the workbook itself, switch to the left here, we actually build in a few pages that are just informational about the workbook. There we go. That was just an overview of the FAF data, what it is, where it came from. There we go. And credits to the data. We've got little information about how the filters in fact work, key functionality, and then the global filters that we just looked at. And then you're on to a view of the data. So in this case, those 3 origin areas that were identified in the state of Tennessee have a little pie chart. Way too many slices to be of significance other than to show the relative amount of traffic moving in and out of these areas in this case, and color-coded here. If you want to filter the data, you can use any of these sliders. Say I want to look at only commodities that had at least 34,000 tons. It recalculates the data, it recalculates all the information down below. We're comparing the 2011 tons and the 2007 tons. I think we have a new version of this with the 2012 provisional data in it. But if I wanted to see, well, what is all this, who potentially is handling this stuff, we build in some hyperlinks so that then we could go out and, for instance, pass that information out to a Google search, a Yellow Pages search, Manta search, Hoover search, and kind of see who those customers might be that are dealing with Tennessee plastics and rubber, which is kind of that subcategory of data. So if you were in a sales marketing perspective, for instance, but again, think of this in your own data. If you've got data that has, here are all the trucking companies, and you want to be able to pass that trucking company link out to a website to be able to see who that trucking company is, get right on their website, find out who their contact people are from an emergency or just an informational basis. Very easy to do with this particular application. I'm going to close out of that screen. We're going to go over to...
John,
yes.
Can you back up?
Sure.
How did you find the Tennessee plastic?
It was in the commodity group, and all we did was pass the commodity group information, because that was the bar of the graph that I selected. We passed that information along with the Tennessee out to a Yellow Pages search, so that it would search Yellow Pages for those commodities within the state of Tennessee. Now, if you wanted to look at that and refine that to a geographic area, you could just add Knoxville to that and see, well, who's in Knoxville for this commodity in the state of Tennessee. But it's a starting place to get up and running without having to key everything in from scratch.
The reason I asked that question, I'm sorry that I'm...
Sure.
The reason I asked that question is we might have a data breach in terms of confidentiality if you are able to find Tennessee plastic.
Well, I mean, I could do a search for Tennessee plastic on my own from anything. All we're passing is a commodity code. So there's no customer information in there.
Right.
It's an open-ended search for anybody that, and the results you're going to get back from the Yellow Pages, I mean, they're going to include the local guy that's, I don't know, sells cellophane to,
No,
party
I don't mean
stores
you, but
kind of thing.
this can be something we need to address.
Okay.
Thank you.
But generally, I mean, we're only using the data that's there at the level of detail that it is. In this case, we want to be able to look at those flows. So again, you've got your origin points down here in Tennessee, and right now we've colored the flow by truck and rail, but we could switch that around and color it by, say, major group, so that you can see what that flow is. And if I want to say, well, where are the chemicals going, I can highlight that, see what that is. Again, change the tonnage, change the miles to be able to kind of work through that data. So as a starting point type of tool to be able to understand, because if you just look at the FAF data itself, I mean, it's, I don't know, half a gigabyte of rows and rows of rows and rows, so somehow you gotta get your head around it. This was an attempt to be able to get your head around what that data, but, you know, think of your data. You know, accident data, congestion data, whatever that is, you can build the same kind of thing out of it. There's nothing magic about what we did. This is just a data set I had to do it and represent it with. One other thing here, and then I gotta get to my live demo and build this dashboard out for you real time, and hopefully not, I had a number of things that I wanted to show you, but in the interest of time, I've shown you some very specific things that were built out for a purpose. What I'm going to bring up right here is a sampling of workbooks of different types of things that can be done with Tableau. So, for instance, I get back here. If you want to see different types of bar and line charts, there's what those look like. I mean, again, this is sample. A lot of this comes from Tableau Public. There's a public website, again, where bloggers and government institutions can post their data. There's different ways that you can look at maps and geocoding. So you can do some of the heat map, county mapping. The database actually covers worldwide, but obviously our focus tends to be more here. Time series data, so you can see some of the data types that are often represented by some of the statistical packages that you may have seen in demos this week, and they are able to be done. So you've got tree maps, bubble charts, word clouds that are all kind of built-in possibilities within Tableau. And with that, I'm going to jump and try to build this workbook out on the fly. Let me just close this stuff out so you can see that I got nothing up my sleeves. Other than, I'm going to open up one Word document so I can pull a little bit of code and save you the time of typing it in later on. So I'm going to look at some data here in an Excel spreadsheet that is actually well drill, well rig information from the Marcellus Shale region. And what is that? Okay. So here's the data real quickly. You've got an application number, a job date, the state, county, the operator name, well name, and a latitude and longitude of where the actual well is. So we're going to take that data, and there's a little utility with Tableau that allows you to just do one click and open this data. Okay. Because I crashed, let me try to save this. All right, now we'll open it up in Tableau. So Tableau looks at the data, says which table do you want to open up. This is where you can do your joins or connect to other databases, but I'm going to connect live to the data. And it says, okay, these things look like dimensions, and these other things here that look like numbers, we think they probably are numbers, so we're going to call those measures, but you can drag them back and forth wherever you need them. So the first thing I'm going to do is carry state out here. I just drop it there. Okay, we got, those are the 3 states involved in this set of data from Marcellus. And I'm going to put the number of records on there. And so Pennsylvania is the big winner in terms of total numbers out there. And I'm going to add job date. And I look at the job date here and I can see that, you know, 2008, 9, and 10 really didn't have much activity. So I want to get rid of those from my data. So I'm going to put this on the filter shelf, use that same field, turn those off, say OK. And I want to keep it that way for everything else that I do. So I'm going to say use that filter for this data source, for everything else that I build out. So there's my data, but I want to see it a little more granular than that. There's quarters, there's months. Okay, I really don't need the quarter information in there because I don't know about quarters anyway. So there's all my data by month, by state. And this has some of the starting point built-in graph types in Tableau. And I'm going to go up here and use a heat map. So now I can kind of see the relative sizes of activity by state, by month, for the number of wells in that particular state. So I'm just going to call that heat map. And I'm going to move on to bringing in the latitude and the longitude that came with our data. And it builds that out in the middle of the state of Pennsylvania. Well, it's using the average lat long, so this is kind of a real cheap way to do a center of gravity model. And just looking at the points right there, it is. So what I need to do is to bring in a little more level of detail, so I'm going to bring in state information, and I'm going to bring in county information. And that's looking okay. I want to bring my number of records up there. I'm going to size those by the number of wells in those areas. That's okay, but some of those areas are, some of those dots are pretty small. So I'm going to change that to a field map. So it's recognized my counties. It's showing me the number of wells in each of those counties. But I'm going to take that and put that up on a color shelf, because that's really the level of detail that I need, is just being able to see that, the difference between how many wells are in those areas. So now that I've done that, I'm going to bring this latitude back up there again. I'm just going to create a second map. And on this second map down there, I'm going to change this around a little bit. And what I want to do is, I want to see specifically in the county, where are these wells? So I'm going to change that to circles. And I'm going to color those by operator, because I want to know who's operating where. And I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to change this a little bit. I'm going to make those transparent because some of them overlap with each other, and I'm going to put a little border around them just so I can see them better. Okay? But I know I have more wells than that, because I have about 2,000 wells in this little data set. So I'm going to bring in the well name to the level of detail. So now I can see all those wells. So now I've got, here's where all the wells are, here's where my counties are. I'm going to go back up here, click dual axis. So now I've got that laid one on top of the other. So I've got my heat map over here, I've got my map there. I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'll make this workbook. I want to show the operator, and I want to show the well type, whether it's gas or oil, and the number of records. And I'm doing this just by double clicking on these fields. Now, you can drag them up here and drop them on these shelves. You can drop them right on the workspace itself. A lot of different ways you can use the tool. So that I'm going to call table. And I'm going to hit this little icon here and build out a dashboard. So first thing I'm going to do is add my map. So I'm going to double click that. And then I'm going to drag my table over here. So there's my table information. I'm going to bring my heat map up at the top. Slide that up a little bit. I really don't need to have this title up there, so I'm going to hide the title, and I'm going to hide the field label, so now it takes up a lot less space. And what else I got going over here? Okay. Because the screen resolution is so odd, let me select my dashboard, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to make this 728. No, I can move that 1,000. I'll make this for an iPad landscape view. There we go. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to tell this to go ahead and fit the width across the top of the page, because it just makes it a little easier for me to see what the month names are. While I still have it selected, I'm going to say fit the entire view, because I want to see all the information in there. And I'm going to make this a filter. So I'm going to tell it to use it as a filter. And I'm going to come over here. Let me slide it back over so you see what I'm looking at. That doesn't need to be that big. So I just slide that out of the way. Again, I'm gonna say make this a filter. And I'm gonna do one last thing here on this dashboard. I'm gonna set up an action on this worksheet. So on this action, I'm gonna say I want that to be a URL action. So on sheet 2, which is my map, I'm gonna paste in this link here. And in the link is embedded the latitude and the longitude from the database. So anytime I change that, it's going to seed that information. I'm going to make that a select, say okay, and there's my dashboard.
Excuse me,
Yep.
is anyone catching either shuttle to the hotel or to the airport? 12:30, they should be leaving in a few minutes, so
Okay.
you want to
I
make
will be
them.
done in about 120 seconds.
Okay,
So now that the dashboard's built, I can click on the month name up there and filter that. I can click on the year, it'll filter just to the year's worth of data. I can click on the state of Pennsylvania, and it'll show me just the Pennsylvania data. I can click on Cabot Oil and hold down my control key and click on Consolidated Energy, see those things together on my map. And if I want to click on one of these well locations, it'll pass that URL out to Google Maps, and there's the actual overhead image of that well being drilled right next to the river. So,
Awesome.
in less than 10 minutes, there was a fully interactive dashboard that now you could publish to your website if you wanted to see where all of the gas well activity is, where the accidents are. Here's where carcasses were removed. You got the data, you can build it out, and you don't need a staff of, 20 people behind the scenes to do it.
Are you able to publish that out to a web view or something like that? For like
Yes.
the folks?
If you have the server, you can put it on your server and have it linked to your website. You can,
You gotta buy the server product to do
well,
that.
or if you put it on Tableau Public.
Okay, public,
You can
okay.
put it on Tableau Public and
Got
link
it.
it to your website, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.